Hi, fellow curious patriots. My name is Matt DiGeronimo. There's an old saying, if you want to hide something, put it in plain sight. But Washington, D.C. has perfected an even better trick. Hide it in complexity. Think about it. When was the last time you actually read a government bill? I mean, really sat down, brewed a pot of coffee, and sifted through one of those multi-thousand-page monstrosities. Never? That makes two of us. But here's the kicker. Neither did the people who voted on it. This isn't an accident. Complexity is a feature, not a bug of our government. Bottom line, corruption hides and operates in the shadows of complexity. Let's call it what it is. If a bill is too long for a normal citizen to read, it is effectively exclusionary. Sure, it's technically public, but practically speaking, it's off limits to 99.9% of Americans. And let's not pretend our elected officials are flipping through these behemoths in their spare time. So who does read them? High-powered lawyers, lobbyists, and corporate executives. These individuals don't just read these bills, they often write them. Former executives from the very industries that some of these regulations are supposed to oversee draft the fine print. These folks aren't amateurs. They understand the system because they helped build it. And because they have the resources to comb through every detail, they find or insert loopholes that benefit them and their industry friends. Not you and I. Take a look at our tax code. It's over 6,000 pages long, plus another 60,000 pages of regulations and law cases explaining it. Politicians and citizens love to complain about billionaires not paying their fair share. And I get it. People don't like seeing Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk paying less in taxes than their local bartender. But here's the kicker. That's not a problem with billionaires. That's a problem with the tax code. The more complex the rules, the easier they are to exploit. But when you have armies of accountants, you don't evade taxes, you legally navigate around them. Now imagine if the tax code was one page long, a simple flat tax or a consumption-based model. How many loopholes would survive? Not many. But the reason our tax code is a labyrinth of confusion is the same reason government regulations are bloated beyond recognition. Complexity benefits those who can afford to navigate, understand, and then game the system. We're told regulations are necessary to protect the public from corporate greed. And sometimes they do, and they should. But more often than not, they protect the biggest corporations from competition. If regulations were clear and simple, everyone would understand the rules. But when they're dense and convoluted, only those with teams of lawyers can navigate them. That means small businesses struggle under the weight of compliance costs, while big corporations with deep pockets thrive. And guess who often writes these regulations? You guessed it, former executives from the very industries being regulated. Unintended consequence? I don't think so. And just to add insult to injury, the government has mastered the art of naming things to sound better than they are. Consider the Affordable Care Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, the Patriot Act, No Child Left Behind Act. I find these names manipulative and offensive. They're designed to sell a concept, not to explain what the bill actually does. And once the branding is in place, the debate shifts away from the substance of the bill and becomes about the name of the bill. How can you vote against the Patriot Act? Aren't you a patriot? Seems silly, right? This is manipulation, plain and simple. But wait, there's more. Let's talk about the absurd practice of inserting unrelated pet projects into these bills. Here are just a few. Invasive Plant Elimination Program. The infrastructure bill allocated $50 million annually to eliminate invasive plants along transportation corridors. Important? Maybe, but in an infrastructure bill? Commission to promote women in the trucking industry. This same infrastructure bill created a commission to address the underrepresentation of women in trucking, Perhaps a worthy cause, but is this really infrastructure? What about sport, fish restoration, and recreational boating safety? It was authorized $13 million annually for sport, fish restoration, and boating safety. Again, not exactly what comes to mind when you think of infrastructure. And lastly, the Seaway International Bridge. The COVID-19 relief bill included $1.5 million for a bridge connecting New York to Canada, a priority for a prominent senator. But what does this have to do with pandemic relief? These are just a few examples of how unrelated projects are tucked into massive bills, often escaping public scrutiny. And who can forget the jaw-dropping candor of former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi during the Affordable Care Act discussions? She said, and I quote, "Think about that. Our representatives are passing legislation without fully understanding its contents, leaving us to deal with the consequences." So, what's the fix? It's not simple. We need to demand simplicity. Not because Americans are dumb, but because we're smart enough to know that complexity is being used against us. I think it's reasonable to demand that bills be concise. If it can't fit on a few pages, it's too bloated. The tax code should be clear and fair. If billionaires can exploit it, the system is broken. Regulation should protect competition, not crush it. If only the biggest corporations can comply, something's wrong. Because here's the hard truth. Nothing changes until we stop accepting this level of complexity as normal. My name is Matt DiGeronimo. Until next time. Hey, like, subscribe, and share. Comment. See how simple that was?